Hello fellow travelers, as always chapters are a thing as well as useful links below. Remember that your activity helps me and YouTube know that the video is good, so please leave those likes and comments. Thank you, and let's get going. In Chamber 1 of Floor 11, Pyro is your best option to break Lavachurl's shield, and it's the only element that we don't have among Spectres in the first half. It's also the best one for the second half to deal with Pyro Eremite, plus I'd suggest to bring an archer to easily stun Anemo Hilichurl or roll. In this chamber we have to protect the monolith, so don't rush, take your time and just try to force enemies to fight you. Keep dealing damage to them and draw them away from the monolith to avoid unnecessary damage. Ranged characters, stones and any form of crowd control can help you with that. Note that some of the enemies are more willing to fight you, so prioritize those who focus on the monolith and you'll be fine. Second chamber starts with just an Abyss Lecter, and you simply have to be ready to deal with its Electro Shield. Pyro, Cryo and Dendro are the best options for this, so any team build around those will work great. For the second half, remember that Anemo and Pyro are the best options against respective Eremites, and Fungi have increased resistance to Dendro and their respective elements. Fungi start very far from each other, but if you run towards the Dendro one, the others should come close enough for you to fight them all at once. Having a way to bring flying fungi down could be helpful to speed up the process. As for Eremites, rush towards the Gale Hunter when they appear, because Pyro one can teleport to you. Try to deal with their pets first and you won't have any problems. In the first half of Chamber 3 you'll have just two enemies that come out one by one. They have increased Hydro and physical resistances respectively, so don't rely primarily on those. The best option here is Pyro again because of the Cryo Shielder inside. If you make your team around Pyro, you won't even notice it. Including any archer in your team can be helpful to stun Ruin Drake, but it's not necessary. For the second half, shields will be the main problem. With Abyss Mages, it's much easier to just swirl them into each other rather than bringing counter elements because they appear all together. And against Hydro shields, Dendro or Cryo will be your best bet, so make your team around those to quickly deal with Heralds. Remember that two of their attacks increase your cooldowns if you take damage from them, so aside from dodging, you can also rely on shields to prevent that. Here's what we get in the end, and these teams were just enough to clear it all, earning 9 stars, but of course they could be easily improved if you have better characters. With current floor 12, Hoyo gave up and made a straight up pay-to-win Abyss. Chamber 1 starts with Whopper Flowers that have increased resistances, especially to their respective elements, and Primal Constructs, against which Freeze or Quicken will be quite helpful to knock them out of invisibility. For both Whopper Flowers and Constructs, there will be 6 enemies in total. 3 of them will appear at once, and new enemy will appear every time you kill one, so it's better to kill all 3 together to split each fight into 2 proper waves. Against Whopper Flowers you can easily make them stack together if you just run far enough, but unfortunately you can't reliably do the same with Constructs, so if you want to pull them closer, you'll need Venti or Kazuha. Other characters just can't move them, so if you don't have either, required power level increases drastically. And honestly, everything else I tried couldn't beat them in time to earn 3 stars. In the second half we have to deal with Hydro and Cryo shields, and as always, using Dendro and Pyro is the best way to do so. Abyss Mages shouldn't be a problem, but Heralds are quite annoying, so here are some tips for them. Focus on Hydro Herald first. Without him, you won't have to worry about freezing and cooldown increases. Bennett's Burst can prevent you from freezing with its constant Pyro application, but it might increase damage you take as well. Nahida makes this fight much easier. Her skill alone does a lot of damage to Hydro Shield even while you focus on Cryo Heralds. If you don't have her, Tighnari is the second best option. He has great solo target Dendro application, but it's very hard to use him properly here. If you rely on him, bring some shields to at least be able to aim during the fight. If you have neither Nahida nor Tighnari, using Dendro will become much harder because Heralds move a lot. However, Cryo also works, including swirling Cryo shields into Hydro one. If you have Venti and Kazuha, you can use Kazuha here. With Bennett it's easy to make his burst absorb Pyro, and with that it will deal extra damage to Cryo shields, and sometimes it also swirls them into Hydro one, dealing more damage to it too. If not, Sucrose with another Animo character work just fine too. Bottom line, great options for this chamber are quite limited by the characters you have, but here are the teams that I managed to clear this chamber with, earning 3 stars. Second chamber is much more straightforward. Just use Quicken against Terrashroom to stun it and simply restart the chamber if it decides to go for a run and waste your time. Aggravate team is the best pick here because of the boss extra Dendro resistance. For much more info about the boss, you can check the full guide I made. Against Thunder Manifestation in the second half, Dendro, Pyro or Cryo will be your best options because of its constant Electro aura. The boss often teleports and sometimes even flies up, so ranged characters will have easier time here. Also note that if you apply Dendro or Hydro, they will stay on the boss, so Bloom, Hyper Bloom or Burgeon will work just fine despite boss Electro aura. Here are teams that I used to clear this chamber, for example. Last chamber this time is all about suffering. In the first half you'll have to fight 4 consecrated beasts, split in 2 waves. They are very resistant to their own elements, move too much, hit like a truck and ignore pretty much everything you do. Do your best to stay close enough to them both to prevent them from using their annoying ranged attacks, but if you have to pick, stick to the Hydro one, unless it's having fun running all over the place or you manage to stun the Dendro beast. Since they ignore you, the best strategy against them is to ignore them back, so increasing your poise, most likely by having a shield, will give you much easier time. I explained it in details in the previous breakdown, so I'll leave a link to that fragment below. Luckily, in the second half we have only Iniquitous Baptist. Against him you just have to bring the counter elements to deal with his shield. He will always cycle through Cryo, Hydro and Pyro shields in this order, so you'll have to rely on Pyro, Dendro and Hydro respectively to quickly break them. This elemental combo basically screams Burgeon, but don't be fooled by it. Abyss version is different from the normal one. Here boss doesn't create elemental rings in the very beginning, so you'll have to deal with stronger shields, and normal Burgeon teams don't have enough Pyro application to quickly deal with them. If you want to use Burgeon here, you have to add some source of Pyro on demand, in form of Bennett for example. Also, by applying counter elements before boss activates the shield, you can immediately damage it as it activates, which you can use to your advantage, especially if you use sacrificial weapons that won't proc if you hit the shield without dealing damage anyway. This boss isn't difficult, but might require you to adjust your rotations and come up with some extra energy generation because of that. Although as long as you have ways to break his shields quick enough, he shouldn't be a problem. For more info, including the best characters to apply said elements so far, check my full guide. Here are the teams that I used to clear the entire floor 12, including this chamber. However, I would rather replace Yao Yao with Kirara to have easier time against the beasts if I had her build. Anyway, that's all I have for you this time, fellow travelers. Good luck with your runs and have a great rest of your day.